Perfect. We can see your slides. Tula, can you hear us now clearly?
Yes, I can hear you now. It was a bit cacophonic. I don't seem to be able to start my video. You have stopped it, but...
Okay, Alan, can we give Tula permission and co-host her, please?
Tula?
Because she had to sign off and sign in, yeah. Yes, you should be able. Can we try that now?
So we are live now on YouTube, okay?
Can we be live when we start, Alan?
Okay, now the picture is there. Good.
Actually, this one is unlisted, so I think it will not be public. It is only for us.
Okay, Louis.
For those with link.
Okay, can you give permission to Louis? He cannot open his video.
Louis.
You see him on the list? Yeah.
Can find.
You can't find him.
Juha, Emma. She's here or he?
He is here.
What's the name?
Luis Felipe Montero.
No.
No? Yeah, Luis Felipe, this is his name. I see him chatting. You don't find him on the list?
I can't. Luis Fernando.
He's in attendees.
Yeah, I will make him promote to panelist.
Panelist, please, yes.
This one, Luis Fernando, Paula. Okay.
No, not this, the other one.
Not this one? So I will remove.
Yes, please. LuisFelipe Monteiro.
Okay, Montero. Okay.
Yes, please.
Promote panelist.
Good to see you. You know, the technical life, we think we're used to it after 1 year and a half, but then no.
Ooh. Okay, okay.
So, hello everyone. Greetings from the United Arab Emirates, specifically from Dubai, where it's 4:35 p.m. from our end. Since I'm aware we have different time zones on this panel. And welcome everyone to Adapting Public Finance to the Challenges of the 21st Century. I'm delighted to see so many participants here with us today. My name is Abir Tahlak. I'm the director of the Mohammed bin Rashid Center for Government Innovation here in the United Arab Emirates. A few words on who we are. The Mohammed bin Rashid Center for Government Innovation was established to stimulate and enrich the culture of innovation within the government sector, of course, through the development of an integrated innovation framework. Our goal is for innovation to become one of the key pillars of the UAE government, which aims to develop government operations, enhance the UAE's competitiveness, of course, making the UAE one of the most innovative governments around the world. One of our center's leading initiatives is the Global Innovation Council, which is a platform to imagine and set in motion the future of government innovation. The Council is a neutral actor, serving as a pool of exceptional global experts to lead discussions, articulate way forward for what the future of governance should look like. Hence, our goal is to become a platform that inspires the governance enthusiasts around the world, like you all here, to come together and solve the toughest of governance problems together. The Global Innovation Council is devoted to rethinking public governance, and we're gathered here today to bring to light the first of its pilot projects. Our members, Jeff Mulgan and Yoha Lepanin, have recently finalized a paper that includes ambitious ideas of the future of public finance, more specifically anticipatory public budgeting. The Global Innovation Council has a dedicated fund to pilot and test those ideas. This fund is open for all governments to join in and pilot a project with the UAE government. The project we'll be presenting today is a result of the pilot fund. Part of what we do too here in the UAE at the Mohammed bin Rashid Center for Government Innovation as well is connect with other governments and like-minded organizations to learn more and to learn from each other as well as spread as the culture of innovation to a wider audience. One of the things we do on a yearly basis is a call for innovation with the OECD and the OPSI team to capture innovation cases from public sector. We then take and choose the projects and turn them into live experiences at the edge of government as part of the center's participation every year at the World Government Summit. We also connect with government leaders, global experts, civil servants to discuss latest global innovation trends and how to adapt them within the government. We're gathering here today to launch a first pilot project from the Global Innovation Council. The white paper on anticipatory public budget made us realize that governments face many complex, difficult, long-term challenges, from handling demographic transitions to climate change, navigating the fourth industrial revolution, managing pensions. But while these challenges require long-term action, many of those methods used by governments are very short-term. Question is, how can governments adapt to public finance methods to challenge this 21st century? How to use data to improve feedback, analysis, learning, how to deepen an investment approach in particular fields with human capital as a good example. All these questions, thoughts that come to our mind will be answered in today's session. We're honored that we have partnered with the National School of Public Administration for the launch. We will be hearing from them and also learn about the Brazilian experience when it comes to public finance. Today's session will also feature one of the themes addressed in the white paper, phenomenon-based budgeting. In the end, we will have a reverse panel to further discuss anticipatory public budgeting and phenomenon-based budgeting and answer some questions directly from the audience. Please feel free to use the chat to post any questions you have. Joining me here today, Diogo Costa, the president of ENAP. Honored to have you with us and a pleasure to hear from you. We have Luis Felipe, the Secretary of Digital Government at the Ministry of Economy from Brazil. We have Jeff Mulgan, our Global Innovation Council member and Professor of Collective Intelligence, Public Policy and Social Innovation at University College of London. Tula Varis is with us, Principal Performance Auditor, the National Audit Office of Finland. Juha Leppänen, our Global Innovation Council member and Chief Executive Officer of DEMS Helsinki, a Nordic think tank. Lovely to see you all. Thank you for all being with us. And allow me now to introduce our first speaker, Diogo Costa. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Abir. Thank you everyone at the MBR Center for Government Innovation. For us, it's a great pleasure to be partnering with you for this event, and I'm sure for many others. Also, I'd like to greet all the panelists. I really hope to learn a lot from you, from your work and from your words. For ENAP, this theme is one of the key themes that we have been working on and doing projects on. Brazil has had many challenges when it comes to its public budget. Last year, due to COVID, we had a very ambitious program of emergency spending. According to the IMF, it was the most generous program of any emerging country. And it also outspent even many developed economies, even though they were richer and could borrow far more easily and cheaply than Brazil. And while that saved many lives, it also came at a cost. So last year, our national budget was 11% of GDP. And this always gives us a need to also make sure that we are spending more efficiently. And we know that governments, and Brazil is no different, are better at preparing budgets than spending budgets. So here at ENAP, we are developing an open innovation challenge so that citizens and public servants alike can submit solutions to some of our challenges for public budget. So ENAP, in 2019, we launched a platform for public challenges in the fashion of that many other governments have. Brazil didn't have a platform such as that. So it launched, and last year it was a crucial asset that we had to deal with some aspects of the pandemic. We had we had 5 challenges related to the pandemic, and we raised almost 2.5 million reais in prizes for those challenges. We had many important partners in the public sector, in the private sector in Brazil, as well as the IDB. And this year, we're tackling the budget as one of our main goals for with our challenge platform. It's desafios.gov.br. So we have two main challenges. One is to increase efficiency and the quality of the public budget. So we have a specific structure of budgeting in Brazil that favors maximizing the execution, maximizing spending, but not quality or efficiency. And we have a legislation that is past due to reform. It's from 1964, and it doesn't take into account all the technologies and changes that the world went through in the second half of the 20th century and the first 20 years of the 21st. So it doesn't actually focus on rationalizing spending according to what we've learned in the past half century. So we are opening this challenge to increase efficiency and economicity, which are two principles of the Brazilian Constitution. And it's a call for policy proposals that make sure that government agencies have an incentive themselves to increase efficiency. So as in many other countries, if government agencies such as our school, the National School of Government, if we are more efficient and we use less of our budget, doing more with less, we're going to be punished and have a lower budget next year. We see this because most of, not most, but many other government agencies, when it comes to the end of the year, they suddenly want to spend on training programs and things that we do. So we have a hard time saying no to these government agencies at the end of the year, where they all channel their resources to ENAP. The second challenge is also how government agencies can better use their state and also make revenues out of those of their property. Right now, the Brazilian federal government has over 50,000 units of real estate across the country. Over 3,000 of those are idle, but there is no incentive for any government agency to sell them. So in our school, for instance, we have 2 apartments in Brasilia, but if we sell them, we have no incentive because that money doesn't come to us. There's no kind of bonus. There's no actual positive consequences for the agency itself, beside, of course, the conscience that you're better using the public resources. But you're also opening this challenge for solutions, for proposals, so that there is a better structure of incentive for us to use a real estate or physical property. So this is going to be held in 2 phases. The first one is we're going to have an immersion with specialists on the theme. So the citizens can become more acquainted with the main problems, but also public servants can share their experience. And we also have workshops in legal, design, and visual law. So this can help them shape up.
I think
proposals are developed and submitted to have this. Sorry, we're working with the Ministry of Economy, and this is going to be one of our main challenges for 2021. And it's open for Brazilians, but also open for international scholars and academics as well. So I hope we can have good proposals and from the international community as well. Well, thank you so much. And we hope that, as I said, this is the first of many initiatives that we do together with MBR Center for Government Innovation. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And thank you, Diogo. And as you said, this will be the first of many collaborations and touch points, hopefully together. And as you said, I think human capital, building capabilities is one of the key pillars that we believe in the UAE government. Leadership has focuses a lot on that, and we at the Mohammed Rashid Center for Government Innovation have parallel streams in building capabilities like the Public Sector Innovation Diploma, specialized sessions. We have a whole Ibtakir. Ibtakir is innovate in Arabic. So ibtakir.org is a whole dedicated platform. It's in Arabic, so it's for the Arabic speakers, not just the Arab world, but any Arabic speaker around the globe, to access information, to access, what is public sector innovation. We have classes for free, MOOCs on tools, on how to create your own innovation lab. So I think human capital, building capability is a key factor for all, future development. So we share that. And now we will hear about the experiences from the Brazilian government in public finance by Luis Felipe from the Ministry of Economy. So over to you, Luis.
Hello, thank you, Abir. I would like to say hi to Diogo, Tula, Job, and Hula. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm representing the Special Secretary for Debureaucratization, Management, and Digital Government. I am currently in charge of the digital transformation of Brazilian public sector. But previously, I was in charge of the innovation agenda within the public sector. And I was part with Diogo in the establishment of our innovation lab that is now under ENAP. And it's good to be here because I was 2 times in the government summit that you used to hold in Dubai. And I think it's a huge opportunity for knowledge sharing, networking, and to understand what other countries are doing. So please, it's an opportunity for us, and I would like to thank you to make this kind of a collaborative environment with you. Regarding innovation and budget finance, I may say that the world will be completely different than it is today. And the recipes that we used to use in the past years will not be the same to solve the future problems. In the past 15, 16 months, we had COVID, which accelerated much of our visions to the future. So in a few months, we might have accelerated 5 to 10 years on the digital revolution of the society all over. In Brazil, in 1 week, we had to put more than 300,000 public servants in remote to make sure the government operation keep running. Also, as Diogo mentioned, we paid emergency aid within 30 days. Since the legislation was approved to the first payment, we paid emergency aid for 65 million Brazilians. This was made 100% through digital channels. And some of those people were not digitally included previously to that experience. So that push had the opportunity and the challenge to include those people. They had to get a mobile phone, a mobile app, to use that digital channel to request for the emergency aid. We opened 30 million digital accounts, banking accounts. So we made a huge financial inclusion of the population in 30 days here in Brazil. In the governmental side, regarding administrative budget investments and also public service provisioning, we started in 2019 the digital government strategy that is coordinated by my team, but is handled through the entire government. And we transformed to digital more than 1,300 public services in, I would say, 2 years. We created the single window for public services that is now gov.br. We serve 100 million citizens per month through a single window public services, what I used to call one of the largest public services marketplaces in the world. We are now facing the new challenges, how to keep privacy in mind, how to keep information security, how to keep cybersecurity, how to manage the digital infrastructure that are now a base pillar of the operation of the country. But I would say that we should think about our financial model, our financing model, and budget expenditures based on the opportunities of the future. Let's think about how countries will operate. We are sure that the future of government is a digital institution. Government will be digital institutions, like the financial sector here in Brazil is already. So all the efficiency that we get from that transformation will save us money and create opportunities to spend more, to give more to our citizens. On the other hand, the digital economy in Brazil will create, not only in Brazil, but everywhere, will create hundreds, thousands of opportunities and saving initiatives that will create also more revenue to the country, but will save investments that today we need to do on physical infrastructure. Where will we work next year? We don't know. Exactly. I can be working from Dubai and I can do everything I do here in my office. I can be working anywhere as a government official. But it's even more exciting if I am a private sector employee. I can be a digital nomad if I want. And as a digital nomad, I can choose where I will live, and I can choose which country in the world I will put my effort and work for. So countries will not be only competing for resources, will not only be competing for commercial trade. Countries will be competing for people, because people will be able to choose where to live. Now, physical place, environment, it's not a limit anymore to work anywhere. So if I want to live in Dubai because I like to buy and want to work for a US company, I can do it. I buy a ticket and airplane, I go to Dubai. And if the government of Dubai gives me a working visa that understands that the future of labor will be like this, I can work legally in Dubai to an American company. Okay, this company will be collecting revenue and taxes in the US, right? But I will be spending my money in Dubai, and I will be developing the economy of Dubai. So how? But on the other hand, if Geoff or if Varys want to live in a tropical paradise like Brazil, please come here. We have to evolve our visa policies. We have to evolve our labor market to make sure you are 100% formalized and okay to be here working for somewhere else. So how this change the environment, how this change the relationships, how this change our investments within the government. Just to raise some points in a more general overview. Regarding administrative expenditures of the government, governments all over the world used to spend on average 10.4% of their operating expenses on information technology. So 10% of what we spend operationally is spent on information technology. How is your country doing? Here in Brazil, we spend 2%. So we must evolve 5 times to be the average of the world in IT expenditure. Also, national governments used to spend around $20,000 per employee per year. So how is your country running on this? If you are not attention to that new way of spending money to increase country's capacity to increase economic development, you might be transforming your economy in a consumption economy instead of a production economy. Will you produce the new technology? Will you get value from the opportunities and be a producer in the new economy? Or you will be waiting and will become only a consumer of that economy? So this will change in a broad sense how the countries will develop in the future. So I just want to say that all of these challenges and opportunities are in place for us to decide right now. And the collaboration and innovation that Diogo from ENAP is coordinating with international institutions like the institution that Abir is working with, it's very important for us because these researches that we make and all the collaboration will create better institutions, more innovative institutions to understand how the future will be and to prepare our economies and societies for that.
Lovely. Thank you, Luis. I love how you said, you refer to us as digital nomads, because this call and this session, this panel is just an example of what does that mean, and how the world and institution and different parts of governments are all interconnected in a way. And some of the things that you mentioned are really the focus areas for most of us nowadays: privacy, data, the digital world challenges. But I think COVID taught us that when we face a real challenge, this is where innovation comes in, where we accelerate a lot of our processes, to actually serve the better good of the people. So thank you for the thoughts. And now I think the moment we've been waiting for, we'll be hearing from Jeff on the anticipatory public budgeting and how can public finance be better adapted to long-term strategy, having lived these challenges, and how can we better prep for the future. So over to you, Jeff.
Well, thank you very much, Abir, and thanks to the Mohammed bin Rashid Center for a willingness to try things out and innovate, which is actually quite rare in the world. I was very interested hearing the previous comments. I've actually worked a bit in government in Brasilia and in Helsinki and in Dubai, and although there's some great advantages in being digital nomads from anywhere, I do slightly miss visiting your cities and that old-fashioned FaceTime. So I'm going to share some of the ideas in this report we're publishing today. As has already been said, the last year has seen extraordinary innovation in finance and in every aspect of government because of the COVID crisis, but very much short term, how to quickly get money into the hands of households and businesses and so on. What we're talking about now is in a way the mirror of that, and the long term. How do we make public budgets better able to cope with the big issues of our century: science, R&D, health, education, climate change? Some people find issues of finance quite boring. They think it's sort of accountancy and audit and so on. So I'm going to start off with a quote which I love from Joseph Schumpeter, the great economist. And he says that public finance is actually where you find the true spirit of a society, the deeds its policies may prepare. All of this is written in its fiscal history. And those who know how to listen to its message discern the thunder of world history more clearly than anywhere else. So what we're talking about in some ways is technical stuff, but in other ways is, I think, about the thunder of world history. Because anyone who works in government knows that budgets actually are what drive so much of the reality of what is done. What is prioritized in budgetary terms becomes real, isn't just words and speeches and press releases. So the starting point for this project was looking at a series of things we thought were maybe wrong with our current systems. And I'll go through these very quickly. First of all, that even though most governments do have capital budgets for bridges and roads and airports, most of their spending, which is on people, is essentially organized year to year. And yet we're in this very odd time when people last longer than the physical infrastructure. If you're investing in primary education or healthcare, you're looking at an impact over 40, 50, 60, 70 years, and yet we treat it as if it was just a spending and results in 1 year. There's still little link between budgets and the impacts they're trying to achieve. I'll come on to this later. Governments aren't yet using many of the potentials of data and AI to make their budgetary allocations more efficient. There is some use of investment methods, but not actually for the things which matter most, not much use of rates of return, balance sheets, and so on. And budgets are still often stuck in essentially 19th century departmental silos, even though most of the outcomes which matter are cross-cutting. And they're usually quite opaque to the public. So with this project, we tried to see, could you reorganize finance to better anticipate future needs and priorities, to increase the impact, the efficiency of spending, to learn from what is or isn't working. And also one of the things we look at to create new structures where it's easier for business, citizens, and government to pool their money in things like credits for training. So I'll give a minute or so each on some of the key themes. There's obviously much more detail in the report. The first thing you will find there, and we're going to hear a little bit about one of these in a moment, is actually what are the innovations around the world from which we think a lot can be drawn. So there are things like the public pound multiplier, which you can see on the right-hand side from my country, trying to get a method for looking at the impact a single pound or dollar, real, of spending can have in terms of impact on other departments, cost savings, but also well-being. Because well-spent money does have a big multiplier effect, but it's important to be rigorous in the measurement. New Zealand has created well-being budgets, and Finland is working on this now as well, looking at budgetary allocations in terms of effects on happiness. There's whole of government accounts, phenomenon-based budgeting we'll hear from, different kinds of investment tool like social and development impact bonds. There are now over 200 of these around the world. And because of the pressures on commercial investment, more sophisticated measures for investors to see what impact their investments are having in the private sector. And that's summarized in one of the pictures on the bottom right of this slide. Weirdly, in some ways, the public sector's risks falling some way behind the leading edge of commercial investment in terms of tracking different categories of net impact. So the key thing I think we're trying to suggest is that government should almost as a matter of course look at the time horizon of impact of every kind of spending, a time horizon of impact, but also of risk. This diagram sums it up indicatively. These aren't real numbers, but different kinds of spending have very different shapes of impact. Much welfare spending, it may literally be month to month or just in 1 year. But other things like R&D spending will have very little impact short term. Occasionally vaccines may be quick, but usually it's over 10, 20, 30 years that the return comes. The same for primary education. And obviously there are things like physical building of hospitals which have a certain pattern. And we're asking for future governments really to do this systematically as a matter of course, that they look at spending through the lens of time. This should be obvious. It's kind of common sense, but it's incredibly rare. Almost no governments do this in practice. We then, in related to that, want governments to look at balance sheets in a different way, a more comprehensive way. Some do look at balance sheets in terms of things like pensions and some categories of social security spending, but there's a lot further to go in terms of bringing in government's own direct assets and property, and then also the effect of budget decisions now on the future national balance sheet in terms of human capital or natural capital, physical capital, and so on. Again, I think this is just common sense, But common sense is a very long way from common practice in this respect. And almost no governments around the world actually have a comprehensive balance sheet yet of this kind, which then guides decision-making in the current year. We look at the case for creating explicit long-term budgets. Maybe every government should have an allocation for spending now, priorities for spending now, which could have the biggest effect in 10, 20, 30 years' time. That would be quite an interesting thing to get departments to compete, to show how they have ideas, opportunities for funding which achieve big, big returns a generation or two into the future. Most of these are likely to be cross-cutting. And in this diagram, we show, for example, cross-cutting learning budgets involving many different ministries, but with pooled tracking of actions, measurement of impacts and outcomes and so on. And again, this needs to be part of how future national budgets are organized. And of course, SDGs too, as in the right-hand picture, cut across many departments. A lot of this has to be driven by evidence. If you don't have evidence on what's happening or what's working, you can't actually have a smarter budgetary system. And here the growth of the what works movement, the more systematic measurement of evidence is absolutely crucial to this. As much of my work at the moment is doing this in relation to COVID policies, for example, where you look at every area of public spending in terms of its cost, its effectiveness, the strength of the evidence, which allows you to draw judgments. And then you, over time, hopefully reorient money to where there is the biggest impact. And you don't do what we were hearing about from Diogo, which is so common, where actually if one department is efficient or saves money, they're penalized the next year, not rewarded. And this is, again, I hope, part of the emergent new normal. Equally, it has to involve data. And so we look in the report at, again, more systematic data tagging of each area of spending. So you tag which population group it's meant to be supporting, where it's going, what impacts it's trying to achieve, so that over time, there is much more systematic feedback about what works or what doesn't work, or imbalances or gaps, to enable decision-making to become smarter. And there'll be big, big opportunities to use artificial intelligence to support and inform these feedback processes and achieve much smarter budgetary systems. Some of you will be familiar with digital twins, which are being widely used in some areas of manufacturing and logistics, beginning to be used in cities for creating a digital mirror of the physical energy transport water flows. And we argue that within a few years, every government should have a budgetary digital twin. So you can almost play with what would happen if we increased investment in X, what might be the results in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time. The technology is actually there to do these sort of things, but they're not widely used, and I've yet to see a single parliament using a digital twin to help guide government allocations and prioritizations. So I hope that gives a flavor of what we're looking at in this report. Our timing in some ways has been bad and in some ways good. Bad in that last year saw the most dramatic shortening of time horizons in living memory because of the crisis. Finance ministries had to race to cope with the pressures, and just there was very little mental space to think ahead. But as we move into the beginnings of a post-COVID period, and some governments are looking at recovery plans of all kinds, it's striking in polling evidence that there's a big public desire to use this moment to be much more long-term, to use it in a transformational way, to deal with the big issues of childhood, climate change, health, and so on, and not just return to business as usual. And that has to mean public finance treasuries being part of that and finding better ways of using money for the long term. The US is a really interesting sort of case in point at the moment, with enormous increase in public spending under President Biden for recovery, but actually very little of it using any of the methods I've described so far. In many ways, it's a very old-fashioned sort of machinery for quite a modern set of goals. So I hope out of this report, we can work with governments applying these in practice, developing new methods, new capabilities, and ensuring that the decisions made in 2021, 2022 actually are ones which then, looking back from 2040, 2050, 2071, the centenary of the UAE, will look like intelligent decisions, wise uses of money. And that's the sense in which anticipatory public budgeting, I hope, will become not much more than obvious common sense in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. This was very insightful, and looking forward to governments who will actually try those tools and, to live and see it on ground. So Tula Varis will talk to us about the relevance of long-term aspects and phenomenon-based approach from the Finnish experience. So over to you, Tula.
Thank you. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are located at the moment. And to Jeff, auditing is not boring, if you, as you said. I think I can shorten my presentation quite a bit because many of the things I thought I would start with have been said. I mean, we are living in an increasingly complex world, facing risks like climate change, what have you, COVID-19, urbanization, social disintegration. All of them are kind of phenomena, which, as Jeff said, they are cross-sectoral. No single one sector can solve them alone and with their own budgetary resources, so to say. And also these challenges are long-term in that sense that even though what we decide today affects on these phenomena, which we have to take into account, anyhow, they can't be solved during a budget year or even during one government term. And I think that is the problem we face with the present budgetary systems. The budgeting, I would say, almost all over the world is taking place sectorally and annually. So this is a kind of discrepancy one is also trying to now address in Finland with this approach which we call phenomenon-based budgeting. And there the idea is pretty much as the same as Jeff mentioned about equity budgeting or well-being budgeting. So the idea is to look on certain prioritized, challenged in a more holistic, coherent and long-term manner. So you try to look at on the inputs and interlinkages across the conventional sectoral boundaries of the budget structure. I may, in order to save time, I'm not going to the possible benefits or challenges of this approach because many of them were already mentioned. I have to say that when Diego, for example, talked about the December fever, so the urgency to use or spend all the money at the end of the year, another kind of symptom I've recognized is the take the money and run symptom, which means that you have to allocate as quickly as you can in order nobody come and take the money from your sector. And this siloed approach one has to the budget means that it's from public finance point of view, it's very much sub-optimization. Each sector trying to optimize its own funds, but you are not looking kind of at the overall optimization from the point of view of the whole society. In Finland, the phenomenon-based budgeting has now, for the last couple of years, concentrated on scrutinizing the budget across the different administrative sectors from the point of view of climate change. So the governments have set a target that we would be carbon neutral by 2035, and that is the issue they are now looking. That includes kind of summarizing all the budget appropriations from different ministries in support of this objective. It includes scrutinizing the relevant taxation issues, for example, environmental or energy taxation issues. And it also includes at the moment an attempt to make a qualitative assessment of the so-called harmful environmentally harmful subsidies. So kind of use of funds that is working against this objective. Of course, those subsidies might then be legitimate from some other policy perspective. The government plans to widen this approach to a new phenomena. So if everything goes fine, most probably next year, one will start looking the well-being of children also in this kind of cross-sectoral manner. Our audit office, we have not audited this issue yet because, I mean, it's still very much in a piloting phase, but as it is very, I would say, exciting approach also from auditing point of view, because we are always talking about using the money as efficiently as you can, as cost efficiently, and also as effectively as you can. So we made a study looking to this approach, and if you allow, I would quickly like to share with you some observations we made. And the first is the role of the government. The decision on the phenomena to be looked at cross-sectionally, that decision has to be made on a high political level. The ministries can't do it themselves. I mean, it is up to the government program or what have you to come up with the phenomena to be looked at. And also there is a need to have sufficiently concrete targets for these phenomena in order to have a proper budget execution and then later on monitoring. Jeff was, for instance, referring to the need of verifying the impacts of the use of funds. Another issue, and that might be a little bit trickier one, that has to do with the long-term period or long-term thinking, which is also required when you look at issues that they won't be solved during one government term. And here we found out that there's a huge importance of dialogue and shared understanding between the government and the parliament, especially with the opposition. For example, in our political system, the present government can't tie the hands of the incoming government or tie the hands of the parliament. It's the parliament who decides on the budget. So then there's a need for kind of longer term political consensus on the issues to be addressed. Of course, then if you look how this process then needs to be developed, the role and commitment of the Ministry of Finance is crucial. I mean, they are the key for this kind of exercise to be successful. There's a need for guidance and guidelines for the ministries. There's definitely need for new types of tools, which even we in Finland don't have that much yet. You need to develop, for example, digital auditing or digital monitoring systems. You have to develop tools for cross-sectoral impact assessments and budget analysis and so forth. And also, I mean, the way the budget is negotiated, at least in Finland, it's now that it's the Ministry of Finance at the early stage negotiation bilaterally by each other ministry. And we think that if you want to have a phenomenon-based approach, you need to have all the relevant ministries around the table. So have a multilateral approach instead. The role of Parliament, an interesting question, because, I mean, I would raise just one question, and that is, are the proceedings or the budget proceedings of the Parliament at present such that they would support this kind of cross-cutting discussion? At least in our country, the parliamentary budgetary committee structure very much follows the administrative structure. So it doesn't serve this kind of cross-cutting or cross-sectoral debate. And my final point concerns then the role of budget execution, budget monitoring and reporting. Also there, one sees a clear need for developing new kinds of principles and tools. For instance, in Finland, you can't get a cross-cutting phenomenon-based accounting information just by pushing a button. It's a lot of manual labor if you try to kind of see where each ministry actually used their funds. And then we come to the tricky issue, and I think this is one of the trickiest issue, and that is also what Jeff referred to, the issue of, even though you would be able to follow the cash flows, the ministers are quite good in reporting, for example, to what activities they use the money. But then if you ask them, what were the impacts of the activities you used the money for? That's when you start to get less accurate answers, and definitely there we see that there is room for development. So to conclude, I think that phenomenon-based budgeting may help us to take a whole of government approach also to budgeting. It may help us accumulate information, what Jeff referred to, information on the role and impacts of public finance in tackling these challenges, and accumulating that information in a long-term perspective. And thus, from the auditing point of view also, we think that this might provide one avenue for continued learning on how to use the public funds in a most cost-efficient and effective manner. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tula. I think we're learning so much in such short time. I'm just aware of the remaining time we have with all of you. I've received a couple of questions, to be honest, and I would want to have some of the time remaining to answer those questions. And the questions that I have will be directed to Juha, Jeff, and Tula yourself, of course. The first question that we have is to you, Juha. So generally speaking, public finance and budgeting would benefit of novel and innovative approaches and methods. Why do you think public finance and budgeting have remained until now a comparatively conservative area of governance? What are your thoughts?
Well, many thanks, Aber. That's a very, very good question and an important one, of course. So I would essentially split the answer in three. With the Global Innovation Council, one of the key findings that we have had has been that innovation in the context of government rarely happens when we talk about the core of government activities. So quite typically, we're talking about innovation on the fringes or on specific pockets of government. And this is, of course, very, very understandable. It makes sense, as core activities such as budgeting are very professional. They're very codified processes. They require strong expertise and are integrated in strong institutions. And I believe everyone here recognizes sometimes strong walls that treasuries or Ministry of Finances can have. The second point would be an example from Finland from the spring, actually, because our political cabinet that annually runs frame budgeting negotiations decided to transcend the frame budgets, so go beyond the boundaries of the frame budget. And the public debate was clear. That was a change of norm from the past 30 years. The cabinet was blamed for not taking fiscal stability and responsibility seriously enough. So essentially what we saw was a past dominant paradigm of fiscal and economic policy and thinking that dominated the interpretation. So how to legitimize extended public money use if we are, exactly like Tula said, not able to completely understand the impact of those investments. The expert narrative can dominate the political narrative, and our experience from the spring, I think, very well illustrates the importance of this paper. And then the final point, which is a very clear and apparent one, which is that governments have a very clear tendency to avoid risk. And the risk argument, of course, is a dominant argument when we talk about the core mechanisms of governance. At the same time, where I would welcome a debate and discussion moving forward is to essentially prioritize the risks. So whether the risk within the government, but not getting all the details on public money use and investments right, is more important than the risk, than the imperative to explore new approaches in order to avoid risks within the society that is unable to make necessary investments, for instance, in successful climate policies. So I think this tension and it's how we solve it will be the absolute key if we are to push for public finance and budgeting and those key institutions to actually explore the method suggested in the paper led by Jeff Morgan.
Great. Thank you, Juha. there's another question directed to Jeff, to be honest, from one of the attendees here. So the question comes from Afrin Siddiqui, where referring to the SDGs. So do you get, or how do you get to track deduplication of budgets before and after using those anticipatory tools, and also measuring collective impact of SDG aligned budgeting?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a complex issue. I think what's being pointed to by what we've been hearing, particularly from Finland, is I guess one of the reasons I was glad to do this work with Demos Helsinki and colleagues from Finland, is that it's one of the countries which over many years has been trying to move to a more sort of matrix model of thinking about how government works, that there are horizontal priorities like the SDGs or climate change or competitiveness or children, and then there are the classic vertical departments. And whereas in the past, the big priority was, again, as Tula was saying, just making sure the money wasn't misspent, you didn't have corruption, so it was all the control over inputs. And then in the old days, you had to have vertical departments because communications was expensive. It was very hard to have horizontal communication. We now have all sorts of new possibilities with the internet and data and so on, which means we can operate in a much more matrix-like way and have much more data feedback on impacts. Mm-hmm. And I think many countries will use the SDGs as a framework for doing that. And it'll be really interesting to pool their experiences. And I think that all leads to a much more intelligent, much more holistic system than we had in the past. But as you have said, the problem is the cores of government have been remarkably resistant to innovation and reform over the last few years, and it always has been on the periphery. This is, I hope, one way of trying to move it closer to the core.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Jeff. I'm again mindful of time. So Tula, last question over to you is, are there some obvious and easy first steps that should be taken in different governments that aim to become more far-sighted and anticipatory? Like, which one of them resonate with you the strongest and can be the easy next step?
I think the major thing, and it might come from the political side or it might come from the administrative side, is to realize that we can gain more if we work together in cooperation than trying to solve the issue, complex issues, sector by sector. Mm-hmm. And that's why, for example, why we came with the conclusion that in this case of phenomenon-based budgeting, it might be good to pilot a bit further to see and also to prove that really cooperation counts and matters, and it can actually bring cost efficiency and effectiveness. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one just have to have the courage, and you don't need to change everything at the same time and immediately. Take small steps. Start by piloting.
Great. I think that's a general note for all the changes or any innovative tip to anyone. Just focus somewhere, start small, and just pilot and test it to be able to run. This certainly has been a fruitful discussion. Time does pass. And of course, I would ask everyone with us today to learn more about the anticipatory public budgeting. Kindly visit gic.mbrcgi.gov.ae. You can download the white paper from the website, and a copy will also be sent to all your inboxes. Thank you again, everyone, for your time, your efforts. We look forward to engaging with you in our future events, discussions, and collaboration. Please stay updated with our news. Feel free to follow us, MBR Innovation, and all our social media channels. Wherever you are in the world, I wish you all the best. Stay safe. Thank you very much.